That right now is Meteorologist Brittany
Yeah,
Van
and if
Voorhees.
you see that my eye is tearing up, it's because I was messing with my contact. It's not because Nick's Sturdivant is so beautiful that I'm crying.
She called me old a few minutes ago.
I did no such thing. Just kidding.
I am only 23, Brittany, so stop it. So, Brittany, we got a lot of rain yesterday evening.
Yes, we certainly did. If you were watching Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich's new show from 6:30 to 7 here, we were on talking about this, he and I. Essentially, the big reason why we had so much rain yesterday is because of the sea breeze collision from the storms that moved in from the coast, combined with essentially an area of trough of low pressure that was already over us, causing our normal storms that we have. So anytime that you see any kind of collision of two air masses, two sea breezes, essentially the storms are able to rise, so the updrafts become a little bit more dominant. But then also you have essentially storms that are developing over the same spots that have already seen rain. So it's called training, one of the things that we talk about. And I mentioned this during the midday show today, but another thing to keep in mind is just where you live. If you already live in a low-lying, poor drainage area, or you don't have a lot of, drains on your street, or you live downstream of Uptown, you're at a higher risk because Uptown is called Uptown. Fun little back fact that I learned from actually our very own Larry Sprinkle is the reason why it's called Uptown, even though it's downtown, is because Charlotte is on a little bit of a hill. So back, the time of like wagons and, things like that, they would say, I'm going up to town, because they would go up to town in order to like sell their goods and services. So that's why we call it Uptown. So in theory, we're also, if you had heavy rain in Uptown, you would see it kind of drain, down some of those side streets. So on top of that, heavy rain in a urban area means you're more likely to flood because there's less green grass, less ground to soak up the rain. So with that being said, these are some of the totals from yesterday. Chris compiled some of these together, but you can see a lot of the gauges across a lot of those areas within the 485 loop saw 3, 4, 5 inches of rain, and some of this fell within a very brief 2 to 3 hour period. So it was a lot of heavy rain in a very short amount of time. So if you were in one of those spots that had rain yesterday, you would be more likely to flood today. We will see a few slow-moving storms, probably in areas mostly southeast of Charlotte, because some of that wind is trying to sneak in there from the south and east, but it's definitely going to be less aggressive than yesterday, less widespread, more of a classic summer storm pattern. Doesn't look like we'll see much rain overnight, and then tomorrow afternoon, more likely up in the mountains, where again, we'll try to see some of that southeasterly wind try to push in, but it's going to be primarily southwesterly, which is more normal again for this time of year. So ways to stay weather aware, of course, have multiple ways to get warnings. Download the WCNC Charlotte mobile app. Of course, I work on the weekends, and so I'm always here essentially ready to go on streaming and talk about stuff if needed to. And don't drive through flooded roadways. It's something that is unfortunate that we have to kind of repeat ourselves, but normally when there is some kind of system that causes flooding, tropical, whatever it is, most of the deaths that happen are from people in their cars that get flooded out, or from someone staying in their home and like a tree or something falls on it. So both of those are things that people were, of course, dealing with yesterday. It was flooding and trees falling. The slow-moving storms, of course, will also heighten the risk of flash flooding. Speaking of trees falling, the gusts yesterday weren't that crazy, about 30 to 40 miles an hour, and that's probably at their highest. So it's just a good reminder as to why trees are more susceptible to falling when we're in a stormy pattern or a multiple day flooding pattern. Of course, when the ground is dry, essentially the roots are nice and strong, but once it gets wet, think of like dirt versus mud. Think about like walking in that even. Like in dirt, you're just got a little dirt on your shoes, but in mud, you're getting stuck. It's because the ground is much looser. It's much more saturated. So of course, any kind of tree, especially one that already has loose roots, is much more susceptible to falling. Not a lot of storms this weekend. Again, very scattered, but anything that falls, of course, will have that chance to produce heavy rain. 70s for the morning lows. What that tells you is that it's also going to be extremely sticky, because remember, the temperature can't go below the dew point. So if it's in the 70s, that means it's essentially that air you can wear, that disgusting feeling. Long range, though, we actually start to see a slight break in the classic afternoon storm pattern where it's about 30 to 50%, and we turn our eyes more so to the heat. The Bermuda high builds in a little bit closer to the Carolinas by mid to late next week. You've probably heard that a lot, especially when we're talking tropics. When it's a little bit closer to us, it also allows for some some sinking motion of air, rather, so less susceptible to some of those storms, because it's harder for them to grow. But what it does cause is a lot of heat and humidity. So a lot of these times we see a lower rain chance, but then higher potential for heat. So with that being said, we could see multiple days in a row of the 90s for the first time in 2025 so far, which would also mean multiple days with heat index values getting close to, if not surpassing 100. So still below the threshold for a heat advisory, but still very hot. And again, we know we see it every single summer, but it's something that especially the first can kind of throw us off guard, catch us off guard if we're not paying attention to the forecast. So it's afternoon and evening. We're encouraging folks to be weather aware, stay alert to the forecast due to those flood impacts. Pretty standard weekend forecast, 80s, afternoon showers and storms. But then late week, and I know, Nick, we talked about this yesterday as well, pretty much the 18th through the 22nd looks to be the hottest time. So that's what, Tuesday through Friday? Tuesday through Saturday? So just be aware, especially during that time frame.
And we call that a...
Well, I don't know, because are you okay with it being hot if there's less storms? Again, this is why your criteria, you got to have set standard.
Day by day. Okay, so what's today? What would you classify today as?
An ick for sure.
Okay, there you go. That's all.
No, I mean that to me is standard, but it's more so when it gets to be 89 or 90 and it's hotter, but there's less storms, because yes, there's less storms, but the threshold for heat, I mean, that's still, heat is way worse. Heat is still the number one killer in the United States of any kind of weather thing for people, because it's harder to see heat than like a storm or something like that. So if I would personally think an ick would be worse on a day where we could feel like 99, even if there's less storms, but that's just my personal
We're workshopping this together, Brittany.
I think you got to workshop that on your own if you're going to have an opinion.
Chris,
no, because everybody has a different opinion,
me, Chris, Carlene, you're in this. We're all workshopping this together.
Yeah, but our idea of nice weather is going to be so different.
That's why we put our brains together, and then we come up with what today. So today's an ick. There you go.
I mean, I think we can guarantee that most days with a weather alert, we're probably talking about an ick.
Yeah.
I'm being diplomatic.
Yeah. If we're being diplomatic.
Yeah.
Oh, Brittany, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
No, Brittany, thank you again. Yeah, it's just, we were talking about where we were yesterday when the rain was coming down, because it just kind of caught us off guard.
It came quick.
Yeah, so I was happy to be inside.
I was inside.
Yeah. Carlene just made it back inside.
I just made it inside. I just took Turkey out and brought him back in, and then...
Wait, I actually heard something about, I don't remember, it was Mulcahy, that you and Greg, her boyfriend, one of y'all got the WIA and one of y'all didn't. Wireless emergency alert for the considerable flash
Greg
flood
got
warning.
it, and I didn't.
You should double check to make sure that your location settings are turned on correctly, because there's no reason why. Because you guys would have been, like, based on where it was. Yeah, it doesn't mean, but it's not like you were on the edge. You were fully in it.
Right.
Based on where you live.
Yeah, his went off and mine didn't.
I would just double check, because sometimes you can turn them off, and people will go in and turn them off, or it could have been accidental. You should just double check that.
Interesting.
Being one of my best friends, I would like you to double check that.
Some really good advice out there for folks out there.
I will double check that.
Yeah, so if you were for example, I live in South Charlotte, so again, also in the heart of it. I mean, my significant other and I both got the WIA. We were actually playing Phase 10, fun fact, playing cards, because it was raining outside. And so it didn't concern me, but knowing you and Greg were sitting next to each other on the couch definitely concerned me.
Okay.
Because there's no reason why that should happen.
Yeah.
Now, if he was at work, which is substantially further away, that wouldn't have been an issue, but the fact that you guys were next to each other.
Chilling in Noda in our house.
So if you were next to your significant other, your kids, I don't know, whoever has a phone, and one of you guys got the wireless emergency alert for the flash, I'm just specifically talking about the flash flood warning that was in Mecklenburg County, and someone else didn't, check those wireless emergency alerts that are built into your phone. They will not go off for everything. Of course, you can always get any kind of advisories that you set your phone to. If you have our WCNC Charlotte mobile app, and it's based on location, actually, so if you went and visited Nashville or something for the weekend, it would tell you. But this is specifically wireless emergency alerts, which is like a public safety thing.
Okay.
So essentially emergency management of Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, whoever makes that decision would have sent it out. And it was because, remember, we have three, I know we talk about this all the time, but we have three kind of standards of severe thunderstorm warnings and flooding. Base, considerable, catastrophic. We were considerable. So they'll send the WIAs for essentially level 2 and 3. And so when we talk about severe thunderstorm warnings, that's the difference between 60-mile-per-hour winds, 70 and 80. So they only send those for the 70 and 80.
This is interesting. Yeah,
So,
I didn't know that.
So essentially, anytime you're getting the WEA, that's what we call it, WIA, on your phone, that's essentially a step above your classic whatever. And honestly, if you get one of those, probably the best thing to do is either turn on WCNC if you have linear TV or WCNC Plus, because you know then that means whatever meteorologist on our team is working at that time is probably streaming, talking about the storms. So I think just a good reminder for that.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I know that was but I
No,
meant to
no,
ask you about
no,
that
no,
earlier.
thank you.
And I was
Thank you,
doing
yeah,
midday, and I
didn't-
saw your beautiful face, and I was like, oh, crap, I need to ask Carlene about that.
A shout out to Brittany,
Shout out to Brittany.
the real MVP.
Yeah.
In the words of Kevin Durant. Brittany, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
She'll be back a little bit later. She'll be back in the 3 o'clock hour.